Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, tell us, why is this such a very special episode?
Andrew, this is episode 100.
It's gone quick. It's gone very quick.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, good work.
I can't believe we're already at episode 100.
So we've been doing this now for what? Well, 2 years because we're releasing a weekly podcast, or just shy of 2 years.
Yeah, exactly right.
But wow, it's gone.
To episode already up to triple digits.
That's it. It's gone quick. So celebrate and
and thank you to all of the the listeners, the viewers, and everyone who's tuned in and listened to all the 100 episodes. That would be amazing. I'd love to hear from someone that has. But it's pretty special to be 100 episodes in and have been doing this for a little while now.
Yeah, and also to the people who have also participated on the podcast as well too. Great effort by them, and we thank them for their contribution as well. So probably enough about us and
exactly
celebrating that milestone. But let's rip straight into it. We've got I wouldn't necessarily say something completely different for episode 100, but this is what we do day in, day out. So we thought we'd just revisit the financial advice process and do a little bit of a walkthrough in terms of how we think about financial advice and what's the journey that we take our clients on and what are we trying to achieve and how do we do it. So
episode 100, kind of bringing it all together, putting 100 episodes into one short snippet around, when we're sort of discussing with a client or sitting in front of a client, what we look at, the things that we consider, putting a financial strategy or holistic strategy together, and hopefully giving some of our listeners and our viewers an opportunity to, dissect out of that some of the things that they can do when they're, putting together their own financial strategies.
Tie a bow around it.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's it. And then it's, as a present, unwrap it and episode 100. I don't know where I was going with that, but
you tried. It's all right.
Andrew, I need another coffee apparently. Andrew, lead us in. Where do we start?
Yeah. So look, I guess the first point in call when you're, wanting to get an understanding around your own finances, or for us, for a client's finances, is where are you at now? That's a pretty simple enough question, and sort of most people go to assets and liabilities. You think about all your investments, your property, your potentially cars or whatever assets that you currently have. And then the debts that are associated with that as well. So whether that's a personal loan, whether that's a car loan, hopefully not credit card loan, but a home loan, and trying to work out your current asset position. But I think underneath that, and sort of what flows into maybe not the next stage, because you need to sort of get an understanding around goals, but a very logical next step in the financial planning process is also your cash flow position. Yeah. So where are you at currently in terms of income coming in versus expenses going out?
Yeah, just on that note, like I had a conversation with a client yesterday, and it was exactly that. It was, where are you at now? Just in terms of your life, what does it look like? If we had to write down you on a page, all about you, what it is that you do for work, assets, liabilities, income, expenses. Let's get that down, because we can't improve. And this is not only for financial advice and financial planning, but it's also for life as well. But how do you improve something if you can't measure it? Yeah. So it's getting that starting line in the sand and basically saying, okay, this is where you're at. And then, yes, rolls into, and it's probably a lot more prevalent now these days because cost of living pressure and interest rates have gone up, but getting an idea of where your money is going and how does your money flow? What are you spending your money on, and what does that mean for you and your household in terms of, are you, spending too much over here? Are you not doing enough over there? What does it look like? But getting that budget done, and we've spoken so many times around a realistic budget versus an aspirational budget. So getting that right really is the starting point. to then be able to say, okay, this is that hypothetical line in the sand. Where do we improve? What do we start to tweak? What do we start to focus on in order to improve and optimize a financial position?
Exactly right. And I guess once you've got your starting point, both from an asset side of things as well as from an income or a net income side of things as well, off the back of that, you then need to look at where do you want to head to? Like what are we aiming towards? What are we trying to achieve? Are we, talking to someone who's 45 and wants to retire in 10 years? Or are you, 30, not even thinking about retirement, way too far away and just want to, build a base of assets to be able to, springboard yourself into the future or purchase your first property? Or what are the financial goals that we're, trying to head towards? Because developing a strategy on how to get there is really the only way to do it is if you know the end point. Now, the end point might change. Your goals might change, your aspirations might change, your circumstances might change, and that's perfectly fine. But if you've already got a strategy and you know that, your goals have changed, then all of a sudden, all you need to do is just tweak and adjust that strategy to make sure that you hit this new target, whatever that is. And so getting a solid understanding around what you want to achieve financially is a really important next step before you even start talking about any strategies or products or anything that's going to help you improve your financial future.
Yeah, and just on that note, and not that I want to undermine what you're saying, but you don't necessarily wake up one day and say, yep, I've got complete clarity over what I want to achieve financially and where I want to be in the future and what all of this looks like. And then you get that clarity one day and you go, yep, I've got that clarity. I'm going to go see someone. I'm going to go talk to a professional. It doesn't work like that. We help facilitate that conversation, and it may not even get to the stage where it's necessarily a really detailed formulated plan. It could be, hey, I've got an idea that this is what I want to do, and, can you help me elaborate on that, stress test it, work it out, figure out if it is possible, and if I want to get there, what's the trade-offs that I need to take? As a really simplistic example, and this is something that we went through as a household, for us, I've shared this before, but my eldest is in year 7, so we were putting money aside in an investment to put towards private school fees, and that was an investment that we were saving up for this time, and that was a trade-off between, okay, do we allocate cash flow and surplus funds towards an investment to save for that, or do we put it into the mortgage? Now, there were two competing priorities that we weren't sure which way to go. So once again, we stress tested that. We got some support with it. We got some advice, and that was it. What was more important actually came out of the back of that. And then we got really specific in terms of, okay, what school, how much, what do you think it'll be worth at year 7, year 8, year 9, and so on and so forth in 10 years' time when we started this journey all that time ago.
Yeah, exactly right. And so I think the key takeaway out of that is your goals may not be formulated at the first step, but having an understanding, having an idea so that, as that progresses throughout the journey, you adjust your strategy, you adjust what you're doing in order to, reformulate goals or create new goals, or it's a process, and it's not something that, all happens at the very beginning, as nice as it would be. I mean, I think the ideal scenario for us, which it happens very rarely, but a client comes in and they're, really specific that I want X, Y, Z, and I want to do it in X amount of time, and you just...
It doesn't happen.
Know exactly where you're shooting towards, and so building projections and building a strategy is easy, but it never really happens like that. It's something that kind of progresses over a course of, a number of years and is forever changing and adapting.
So get the line in the sand, understand the client, their circumstances, get an understanding of their financial position with their budget, get an understanding and help formulate where it is that they want to go.
Yeah.
And then where do we pivot into from there, Andrew?
The next real important point is focusing on the cash flow. That's the thing that's going to underpin everything, and stress testing that. So, for instance, we've sat in front of many clients whereby you're looking at their budget, everything looks fantastic. You're talking about, you've got a surplus income of whatever that number is. Maybe that's 30 grand a year, and, you're now talking about, okay, let's potentially look at allocating a portion of that towards the mortgage, a portion of that towards an investment, and building a strategy around that. And then all of a sudden you delve a little bit deeper and their actual expenditure really means that their surplus income is maybe $5,000 a year. And all of a sudden, all of the other stuff that you've been talking about is irrelevant because there isn't the cash flow to facilitate it.
Aspirational budget.
Exactly.
That's
right.
rather than an actual budget. Yep.
So really looking back at what is a client's expenditure, what are you actually spending now? And there are software tools that can also help facilitate that as well to be able to look at actual numbers, but really getting a solid understanding of what's your actual expenditure and then how are you managing that? Because it's all good and well to have saved $30,000 over the last 12 months, but if you don't have a strategy to be able to, continue that in perpetuity, well then it's very likely that, 1 year your expenses might be 20, the other year your expenses might be 40, and all of a sudden you've got these big years of fluctuations in income and expenses that you're not accounting for, and you're always playing defense and shuffling, trying to shuffle money around in order to meet all of the strategies and all of the cash flow requirements that we're looking at. So getting a really solid cash flow strategy is kind of, I don't want to say the most important step, but definitely one of the most important steps because it underlines absolutely everything that you discuss thereafter. So what we mean by that, and again, we've done, full half-hour podcasts on this, and there's even that doesn't fully go through the exact elements of the strategy and how you do it. But essentially, it's a bucketing strategy whereby money goes into a bank account. From there, you're pushing or automatically direct debiting money out into point of sale and non-point of sale expenses. You might have another account where money gets direct debited for investments, one where money gets direct debited for a holiday every year. And essentially what you're doing is creating a discipline whereby you're only spending the money that's allocated towards a certain goal. And so all of a sudden you've got money coming in a consistent basis. You know that all of your expenses are accounted for. You know that your financial goals are going to be accounted for. And we're dealing with actual numbers rather than an aspirational budget. So having a really solid cash flow and budgeting plan, which can be different for different people.
It's different for everybody.
That fits all. I mean, we recommend a certain strategy, but making sure that you're really clear on your cash flow, your net income, and where your actual position is.
Yeah, and I had this. It was actually a client conversation last night. So shout out to Rich if you're listening. But we had this conversation last night, and the reason why we focus on this so much, and the analogy that I used in that conversation last night was because if you don't have your foundations right, similar to building a house or a property, if you don't have your foundations right, no matter how good the building, or in our instance, the strategy is that's built on top of that, if the foundations aren't right, if they're shaky, no matter what you build on top of that is always going to be on shaky ground. So we keep coming back to getting that right first and foremost. And it sounds pretty interesting. It sounds, wow, this cash flow and banking strategy. In reality, it's I wouldn't say it's boring, but it's simple, it's effective, and it works, and it's imperative. So that's the reason why we keep coming back to that. So that's kind of the next stage of the process that we lean into. We get that right. We know we've got the foundation done right, and then anything that we build above and beyond that foundation, being the financial plan and the financial strategy, we know that it's going to be built on solid ground. So
exactly right.
And then we pivot into.
And then from there, really what you're looking at is the wealth strategy. Now, this is all the exciting stuff. This is why 99% of our clients come to see us. And, most people start at this point. And if you haven't done, all of the other prior steps, you're either missing out on opportunity or you're, setting something up that
setting yourself up for failure.
Correct. And the wealth strategy really is encapsulating a huge number of things. And so, not going to delve into actual detail and specifics of it, but really this can incorporate a large number of things, whether it's what does your family house look like and what are you going to need to do in order to be able to purchase your future family home? what are future planned expenses that you're also going to need to account for, like Billy mentioned previously with, private schooling, and how are you going to fund that at that point in time? Is it just going to be funded through cash flow? Are you going to set up an investment to be able to facilitate paying for that in X number of years? How are you going to fund, that future expense? What are when you talk about future expenses, what's the expected retirement income and how are we going to get there? Are you planning on retiring at the age of 65 and at this point in time really your strategy is, pump money into super because that's going to give the most tax effective means of getting there and you're happy to, retire at that age? Do you want to retire at 55 and there needs to be, another investment, whether that investment is residential property, commercial property, whether that's in, shares or managed funds at 55 in order to cover the years between 55 and 65? Are you on track with your current investments or your current wealth strategy and future expenses? And what are the levers that you need to pull or allocate that surplus income to in order to mean that you're, still going to get there at the end of the day? Now, this can be as far and wide as you like. I mean, when we're talking about investment strategies, there's something as simple as a savings account to, plan for a future expense, or there's something as, complicated as some of the investment bonds that we've spoken about previously. Or maybe the strategy is just a debt minimization strategy. I mean, we've sat in front of clients before that, hold a number of properties and provided that they just pay down their debt by the time that they retire, they're going to be, they're going to be there, and that's all that they, really need to do to achieve their goal. So how are you going to pay down that debt? Is it just pay it into the loan? Is it put it into an offset account? Is it look at a debt recycling strategy? This can be as far and wide as it needs to be, or it can be as simple and, risk-free as it needs to be. But ultimately, getting an understanding of, what we're trying to achieve is going to help facilitate that. Or sometimes is it just as simple as, I actually don't know. I mean, and that's completely normal. And so I think a lot of financial advisors talk about, your goals and what you want to get to. And some people, it's just 20 years away is way too far. I have no idea what my life is going to be like. I have no idea where I want to be, but I want to give myself options. So I want to diversify my investments, have investments in multiple pools so that I can adjust for something, or be able to, facilitate some sort of either retirement plan or, future expense at a point in time when it comes up. And that's perfectly fine. Not everyone's going to have the clear goals and aspirations of what we're heading to, but building a foundation of assets is sort of what we're doing.
Yeah, and just on that note, so the way that I've been describing it to, clients that may not necessarily know with some degree of certainty, although there's this underlying feeling and knowledge that they know that, hey, we need to invest our money just because we need to, because we need money in the future. And we need it to grow in order to keep up with inflation and the like. But getting the work done and having those good disciplines, like, yes, need to invest. Yes, need to make sure that I'm paying off my debt effectively. Yes, need to make sure if I've got an offset account, I'm utilising that correctly. But the words that I've been using recently to describe this, if it's not a necessarily, there's a specific end goal or a specific number, it's just, okay, so you want to optimise your position.
Yeah.
So you want to take whatever it is that you've got in terms of your income or your surplus income, and how do I take what I've got and what I'm currently doing in the confines of my capacity. I want to optimise my position to make sure I'm making the right financial decisions to give me the best chance of a secure financial future. Yeah. And realistically, I think that's where the value of financial advice comes in, because it gives people that confidence, knowing that not only are they going to be okay in 20 or 30 years' time, that's great, right? Like, no worries. But that you're making the right decisions at the right point in time to optimize what you've got, because your capacity to do A, B, C will be different to my capacity to do that as well. And it's different for everybody. But the way that I've been talking to people and they're really resonating with it is, okay, let's optimize your position. You may not necessarily know where you want to be in 30 years' time, and that's okay, but we're working towards that, and we're doing whatever you can in the confines of your financial life to be able to optimize that position and give you the best opportunity to achieve financial security.
And I think that, incorporated within all of that and sort of underpinning all of that is making sure that whatever you're doing, you can sleep at night, making sure that, you might maybe snowballing into the, second, third investment property might be the strategy that's going to optimize that position. But if you're not comfortable with holding that amount of debt, if, you can't sleep at night, then you kind of scrap that off the table from the very beginning. And that doesn't mean that you never look at it again. Maybe you consider it in a couple of years' time where, you've seen how financial advice works, you've maybe gotten more comfortable with the process and are ready to embark on something like that. But making sure that it's within your tolerance to risk and making sure that you're comfortable with whatever that you do is going to give you the best chance to stick to a strategy, which is ultimately what's going to help you achieve an end goal.
Yeah, and that's really critical in our role that we play as part of this as financial advisors, is getting an understanding of somebody's appetite and tolerance to risk.
Yeah.
Because, you can do these projections and look, on paper it sounds great and it looks like this, and you assume different rates of return, you assume different rates of debt.
Yep.
Or cost of debt, you assume different taxation rates, and you put it into the calculator and all looks great, and that's okay, and that's how we make our decisions, right? Because we need that information to be able to make an informed decision and a recommendation. But you need to make sure that you've got the right appetite and tolerance to risk, because it's all good when things are rosy, but what's your defensive strategy? So that's a really big, probably a bit of a hidden thing that financial advisors go through, I think, that's not necessarily front and center in people's thinking. But every time I'm talking to someone, I'm like, okay, do they have the appetite for this? Do they have the tolerance for this? What's the plan B? Will it meet the sleep test? Because we can put that strategy together, but if they don't feel comfortable, all of a sudden
things go bad, then all of a sudden
it's kind of talking about those foundations that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly right. And one of the things you're also considering when you're putting strategies like this together is asset protection. Now, asset protection can be in a wide variety of ways. And we've again actually recently did a podcast on it, which was around asset protection if you're a business owner and protecting your personal assets. It can be, holding assets in a trust or in another person's name, so that, if something does happen and if the worst were to happen, there's also, something there to protect those assets and protect the family assets from anything untoward, really.
Yep. Yeah. And look, I guess on that note as well too, we also talk about the insurance piece as a risk mitigation strategy is alongside with estate planning as well too. Once again, it's not the sexy part of the strategy that sort of gets everybody excited, but once again, thinking about what increases the greater likelihood of success of achieving financial security, you need to make sure you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and that just forms part and parcel of the strategy within itself.
Yeah, exactly right. I think before we maybe close this one off, the other thing, just to perhaps give our listeners and our viewers some comfort, is when we're looking at a financial plan and we're looking at a financial strategy, and we call it a wheel, right? Just because it's easier.
Well, we've got a diagram, it's a circle, exactly. Right? So yeah.
So we've got a wheel of a whole number of things that we're looking at, whether it's a debt minimization strategy, whether it's a cash flow strategy, whether it's an investment strategy. So there's a number of things that we've sort of touched on in the podcast, and you don't have to look at everything at once. Yeah. So we get it. This can be overwhelming, and there's a whole heap of considerations, a whole heap of thought that goes off the back of one thing, let alone when you're looking at maybe 10.
Yeah.
So sometimes splitting it up into some bite-sized pieces and saying, hey, let's just take care of this part now. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that that's rock solid, and then we'll move into the next part at a future point in time when there's maybe not so much going on. So it is perfectly fine to just look at an aspect of your wealth plan, an aspect of your wealth creation strategy and just say, let's get this right and nail that down, and then start to, build on that and move forward from that. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yep.
There's definitely some middle ground within all of this, that optimizing a portion of your current financial position is definitely worthwhile, and just doing it in some smaller bite-sized pieces.
Well said, well summarised, and probably to close out our 100th episode, there's probably one thing that I'd say that's been a consistent message throughout.
If this is a Warren Buffett quote,
you know what?
I need to get him on the podcast.
It was going to be. We should chuck it in there anyway. But okay, so two things that we want to get across. Compounding interest, eighth wonder of the world, right? So there's your Warren Buffett piece.
If anyone has any contact or any way of getting in touch with Warren Buffett, please let us know, because it would make Billy's 10 years. It wouldn't even make his year if we could just get him on the podcast for an episode. He can dial in, we can do it remotely, but definitely would be a... Sorry, take.
No. So actually, I'm just thinking about something. So Andrew always gives me a bit of stick around my birthday, right? So next year, not that it's a milestone, it's kind of like a halfway milestone point, right? So what I might do as a present to myself for next year is I reckon I might go to the Berkshire Hathaway AGM over in Omaha. I reckon that'd be a pretty cool present to give to myself. Yeah. So anyway, that's that. And I almost forgot about my last point, but the last point and the message that's been consistent all along is I think just get advice, right? So get advice because it will change your life. And we're not just saying that because we do it for a living, but that's the truth. We see it day in, day out, and it doesn't have to be scary. It's actually really empowering. Is the feedback and the way that people talk to us about it after they've had an opportunity to talk to a financial advisor. So get feedback and listen to quotes from Warren Buffett.
Absolutely. I think that's a nice way to close out the 100th episode. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in, not only in this episode, but throughout the entire podcast. We genuinely appreciate it. And we look forward to catching you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for
everyone.
Today. If you have any questions on what we've talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and it is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.